Hello everyone. Now I am going to discuss a few points about recommendations. Recommendations. What is recommendations? Recommendations means a suggestions or a solution given to someone to solve a problem or to fulfill a need. Where recommendations are used. Recommendations are used in technical writing. It is written based on a problem and findings. It is also used for future enhancements in the marketing field or in any industry for any general problems. And then if there is any fire accident, let me give one example. If there is any fire accident, the safety engineer of the firm can give some recommendations. Say, for example, he can recommend to the higher authority that the worn-out wires, it is recommended that the worn-out wires can be replaced. This is one example I have given. So likewise, a fire engineer or safety engineer or the floor manager can give some recommendations. Next one, it has to deal with some necessary improvements, suitable or feasible remedial measures for a particular problem or a situation. When the safety engineer gives a recommendation or gives a suggestion to the firm or the industry, they can avoid this sort of some fire accidents in future. That is why recommendations are used in technical writing. That's why this topic also is given for engineering students. How to write recommendations? Whenever you write a recommendation, first of all, main thing you have to follow is you have to identify a problem. Second one is what are the causes to a problem? And then there will be many causes, but what is the main cause? What is the root cause of the problem? Next one, analyze the cause. Why the particular, we already discussed fire accidents. So now, why the fire accident happened? How the fire accident happened? Where it has happened? Why it has happened? Likewise, all the questions must be asked. And what is the main cause for the fire accident? Just imagine there is a fire accident in a factory. So, after analyzing or after investigation, the floor manager might have found out that short circuit may be the main cause of the fire accident. And then he has to write some recommendations. Already I told you that he can recommend that in his findings, if he has found out that worn out wire is the main reason or for the short circuit, he can give that worn out wire must be replaced. And then uh, recommendations, while you write recommendations, you have to follow some format. That is, recommendations means suggestions, and then how to write. It has to be written in it has to be written in passive voice. When you write in passive voice, how the format should be, can be, that is, worn out wires must be replaced with a new one. Likewise, can be plus verb 3, must be plus verb 3, should be plus verb 3, ought to be plus verb 3, used to means B1 should have to, you have to use. So here can be checked on the right side. I have given verb 3 means check, checked, checked. Here can be checked, must be installed, should be followed, ought to be stored, used to preserve. This is how you have to use. Another type of format, not another type. One is using modal verbs, you can write recommendations. Another thing is you can use the recommendations by following these sort of words and phrases. It is recommended to replace the worn out wires into a new one. It is suggested plus verb 1, that is the root word 1. It is otherwise called as root verb. It is necessary, it is advisable, it is mandatory, it is imperative. Likewise, recommendations are written. This is the format. Suppose when you write recommendations in negative, that is, it is recommended to not use worn out wires. So not where it has to be used. That is main thing. You should not write recommendations like this in negative statements. It is recommended to not store in. Not, it has to be placed only here, not here. It is not recommended, is wrong. So it is recommended to not store in. It is suggested to not enclose. So this right usage and wrong usage I have differentiated with green and red color. Excuse me. Next, let us discuss one example here. Recommendations to keep the cell phone safe. The question for engineering student is, write a set of 8 recommendations to keep your cell phone safe. First of all, the student has to write a title. Next one, he should not use only the bulletin marks. He has to number all the recommendations. So by using all the words and phrases which I have already shown in the previous um, slide. So number one, first he has to organize. All of a sudden, by looking at the question paper, he should not write the recommendations. First of all, he has to organize all the ideas in his mind itself. And then he has to order all those points. Which point has to come first, which point has to come next, thirdly, fourthly, and then finally what point he has to give. Blindly, the student is not supposed to write the recommendations points. So first of all, he has to organize all the ideas in his imagination, in his mind, and then he has to give one title, and then title is recommendations. Say for example, the question is, write a set of 8 recommendations to keep your cell phone safe. This is the question. So after organizing all the ideas in his mind, the student has to write the title, recommendations to keep the cell phone safe. Number one, it is highly recommended to use cover for cell phone. Now I have used it is recommended. So I have underlined. If the student has underlined all the key points, then the examiner will feel easy when he or she values the paper, because these are all the key points are sought by the examiners. So it's highly recommended. It is suggested. See, third point must be kept. B3, keep, kept, kept. So when we use modal verbs, must be kept, verb 3 is used. So next one, let me go to the first point. It is highly recommended to use cover for cell phone. It's suggested to use a scratch pad for cell phone. Cell phone must be kept away from water. Fourth point is, it's necessary to handle the cell phone carefully. The fifth point is, it's mandatory to service it on regular basis. So I have shown the variety by giving variety of recommendations. I have included recommendations. It is highly recommended, it is suggested, it is necessary, it is mandatory, it is advisable. Besides, all the modal verbs of recommendations has to be, must be, ought to be, I have used. The last point, the sixth point is, the battery has to be charged regularly. The seventh point is, it's advisable to keep the keypad in locked position always. And the last point, that is the eighth point, is the instructions given in the user manual ought to be followed carefully. Ought to be, must be, the same meaning. So these are all the 8 recommendations must be written by a student. So this is the procedure. Another one example, let's discuss another one example. Write a set of 8 recommendations that are to be followed for safety in a factory. This is another example I have taken for discussion. As usual, the student has to imagine all the points, that is, organize all the points before he writes the answer, and then he has to give one title. Here is the title, recommendations to be followed for safety in a factory. It's recommended to have sufficient training to operate the machines. It's suggested to not appoint inexperienced supervisors. I have already given you, that is when you use a negative form of recommendations, where to use not. Here is the example. It's suggested to not appoint inexperienced supervisors, only experienced supervisors. So here the student may commit error by writing it's suggested not to appoint inexperienced supervisors. Not to appoint is wrong. It is suggested to not appoint inexperienced supervisors is the correct usage in negative recommendations. It's mandatory to lock the device to prevent accidental starting of the machine. It's advisable to maintain the shafts, spindle, and wheels with proper guards. It's necessary to provide suitable goggles to the workers. Proper staircases need to be provided. Exhaust appliances must be installed. Special exits have to be arranged during emergency. This is one question I have discussed. The third question is recommendations to help the public to save petrol. It's recommended to drive the vehicles at normal speed, avoiding rash drive. It's advisable to check the tire pressure periodically. It's suggested to apply the accelerator moderately. It's mandatory to have a spare wheel always. The vehicles have to be parked under shade. The gears need to be operated mildly. The brakes should be applied only when it is required. The vehicle must not be overloaded. So these are all the these are all the recommendations type of questions I have discussed. Now I have discussed the three types. Likewise, we have a lot of questions to discuss. So this is the procedure to write recommendations. Thank you.